Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, April 12th, 2016. We're getting into the week here. We've got lots to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, ready to answer the phone and put you on the air. And I forgot to get my little window open here, so we'll get that up in just a second. We've got lots to talk about here today, and I think starting right off the top, there's a very interesting question being posed by RINF.com, which is, how many states does Hillary have to lose before the corporate media calls it a losing streak? She has lost 8 of the last 9 popular votes against Bernie Sanders. She is still coming out ahead in the delegate count because of all that chicanery that's going on. But it really is a very serious situation here where Hillary clearly does not have a popular mandate, so to speak. And it's time for the media to start looking at that. And they're still cheering on for Hillary, and they're still cheering on for Ted Cruz, but they're raising on a busted flush here. And then there's that little issue of Title 18. Now, we already know that Hillary Clinton violated Section 793 of Title 18 U.S. Code because the evidence for it is already in the public record. It's that email that she sent to a subordinate instructing him to strip the classification headers off a document and send it by non-secure means. That's a violation right there, big one. Just taking the headers off or instructing someone to take the headers off, that's the crime right there. It doesn't matter what's in the document. And under Title 18, if you are found violating any of these security procedures, you are ineligible to hold public office. So, Hillary's campaign is now accusing Bernie Sanders of trying to hijack her superdelegates. And Hillary is furious because she raised a lot of money and gave it to the state Democratic parties to buy those delegates. She bought those delegates, bribed them, and they're hers, and she doesn't think that Bernie Sanders should be talking to them about how maybe they should be representing the will of the voters rather than selling themselves like cheap call girls or call boys as part of this circus we're calling the election here. Now, down in Colorado, the Democratic Party there is admitting that they made a little tiny mistake that cost Bernie Sanders a delegate, and apparently the Democrats discovered the mistake a week after the caucus, but are only just now getting around to correct the public record. It's just one of those little oversights here, you know, and it was an honest mistake, really. That's all it was. Yes. Now, the other day, President Barack Obama was in an interview with Chris Wallace, and he's trying to protect Hillary Clinton, and he came out with this bizarre comment, well, there's classified, and then there's classified. You know, no big deal. And a lot of people called him on that because the government doesn't really classify documents that don't need to be classified because there's a cost involved. Procedurally, I mean, it costs a lot of money to classify a document. It costs a lot of money to declassify the document. If you're following all the procedures, there's a lot of man-hours involved in the classification, of tracking the classification, and the rest of it. And Bob Woodward of Watergate fame was on Fox News Sunday and says Obama has, possibly without realizing it, made the email server a political issue. And that means from now through November, the Hillary campaign is not going to be able to delink from that. Obama just welded that server to Hillary Clinton's backside. Or if you want another metaphor, it's now the albatross around her neck. Now, Politico has waded in trying to defend Hillary Clinton by saying, you know, if it was anybody else but Hillary Clinton, they wouldn't bother prosecuting. It's just not that big a deal. Tell that to David Petraeus and tell it to that Taiwanese U.S. Navy officer who are looking at charges for doing considerably less than we think Hillary did. And the establishment media is proving why we call them prostitutes and correspondents when they come out with this stuff. Now, the latest news coming out of the Ted Cruz campaign, Michelle Wiles, who is a very influential conservative activist, just quit her job as part of the South Carolina leadership team for Ted Cruz, and she's moving on over to Donald Trump's campaign. Wiles apparently said Trump's immigration position was the deciding factor in switching on over. Now then, we reposted that video from back in 2013, where Fox News acknowledged Ted Cruz cannot be president of the United States because he was born in Canada. As of the last time I checked, there's still no word from that judge over in New Jersey who's looking at the latest challenge to Cruz eligibility. And every article that I see on this, they're trying to basically say, well, you know, Obama got away with it, so we should turn a blind eye to Ted Cruz. Well, Obama didn't get away from anything. Even the Washington Post admitted that the claim that Obama was not born here in Hawaii was a dirty trick by Hillary Clinton's 2012 campaign. Now, I live on Oahu, and I verified for myself he was born here. And we found out the reason there had been some fudging on the birth certificate has nothing to do with eligibility to be the president. It has to do with the fact that Barack Obama is a love child from the 1960s. His mother was working as a nude model, and she had a fling with the photographer, Frank Marshall Davis, who's even mentioned in Obama's biography as a family friend. Now, we have a lot of reasons to not like Barack Obama, but being a love child from the 60s isn't one of them. I mean, it was certainly common enough. And back in the 1960s, when a woman who had a child out of wedlock got married, rather than go through the very long and costly process of adopting the child, they would just ask for the birth certificate to be reissued with the correct name of the husband. And that's all there really is to it. So, putting aside the fact that the issue over Obama's birth was a campaign dirty trick, let's focus now directly on Ted Cruz. Now, the entire argument made by the Ted Cruz people is that certainly the framers of the Constitution did not intend to deny the presidency to any U.S. citizen just because they were born someplace else. Okay, but in point of fact, that's exactly what they wanted to do. Chief Justice John Jay wrote that. Now, let me give you a theoretical situation to illustrate why Ted Cruz's argument should not apply. Let us say that back in the 1950s, an American woman moved to the Soviet Union, and she had a child there who was raised and indoctrinated by the Soviet Union. Then the woman moves back to the United States of America. Should we allow that child to run for and sit in the White House, controlling a nation that he doesn't really have a strong emotional connection with? Now, there's one more factor. Ted Cruz has a Canadian birth certificate. He didn't become a U.S. citizen until 1974. When Ted Cruz was born, Canadian law did not recognize dual citizenship. So if Ted Cruz has a Canadian birth certificate, he is not an American citizen by birth. He went through the immigration process in 1974. He's most assuredly not a natural-born U.S. citizen. But we know judges are corrupt, and maybe this very long delay is the judges in the middle of a bidding war to go one way or the other in exchange for a promise of a Supreme Court nomination or something. All right, we're coming up on our first commercial break. We've got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to take your call as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. And then we have an interesting update on the D.C. Madam case. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right to the phones here to Tom in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
No, aloha, Michael. Have you talked about the 12th Amendment yet?
Yeah, well, in the context of Ted Cruz not being able to be vice president as well as president, yes, we have.
Yeah, I was thinking about it in the sense of, literally I see the scenario as Cruz being disqualified and Ryan being put in, and seeing that Ryan just went to Israel to get the blessings from his masters. And also a friend of mine got some emails hinting at his intentions to run for president, by what he's saying publicly.
Yeah, Ryan just came out with another press conference saying, I am not interested in being President of the United States of America. Of course, he was always claiming he wasn't interested in being Speaker of the House just before he got that job. So, for what it's worth.
If there's a brokered convention and, say Ryan gets there, whoever gets the nomination, same as Trump and Sanders could end up running independent. According to the 12th Amendment, if no one gets 51% of the electoral votes, the top three candidates go to the House of Representatives to pick the president, and who happens to be Speaker of the House. Just a coincidence.
Yeah, and that would definitely be a history-making event if that were to happen.
And also, you can tell the 12th Amendment was put there to keep the two parties in power. That would almost assure that unless the third party was so popular, they could get 51% of the vote, which is even more unlikely.
Well, especially with all these electronic vote rigging machines out there and the way they're... it's like this election year, they're not even trying to hide the fact that it's all rigged and fake. It's like they're tired of having to hide from us, and this is the year they're saying, okay, look, we're rigging the elections. Your vote doesn't matter at all. Just get used to it. It's the new reality.
Yeah. And let's take the scenario one step further. Say it's Hillary, Trump, and Ryan or something like that, or Sanders in there somewhere as the top three. And Hillary gets indicted, and say Soros is successful with his Democracy Spring riots, and so Obama, I'm sure, out of the kindness of his heart, will extend...
Okay, well, I need to interrupt here because you seem to be operating under a misconception. At the end of the conventions, there will be a single nominee. The House of Representatives doesn't come on in unless there is a third-party candidate in play that prevents either any of the candidate from getting 51%.
Right, that's what I'm implying there, is that if...
okay, you're saying Trump is going to run as an independent. Okay, yes, in that context it could happen.
Yeah.
Well, see, here's the problem. Even though Paul Ryan is Speaker of the House, if he's not a candidate, the House of Representatives can't just vote him into the presidency. It's going to have to be one of the three candidates. Trump, Cruz, or Sanders.
Right, and that would be the brokered convention. Like I said, a buddy of mine who donates a lot of money to the Republican cause just got a letter from Ryan hinting that he's thinking of making a run. I got the same type of phone call before Romney came out there. I knew he was coming out and doing his thing, but it fell apart because I got phone calls because I was a Republican delegate, and so they...
Well, we know Romney made noises, but it was very quickly apparent that everybody remembers all the dirt on Romney that came out when he had his run. And maybe that's the reason why Paul Ryan is saying, I'm not under consideration, I'm not doing it, is he doesn't want the public looking very carefully at him until they spring it on us as a surprise at the convention. Because, if Republican donors and supporters are getting these emails and phone calls, then there's something going on here. But if the GOP comes up with a nominee who was not even in the primaries, I think it's going to destroy the GOP party, the Republican Party. Okay?
Oh, that's the three-way split. But remember, how did Ryan get Speaker of the House? What was his condition?
I actually don't remember that. What was his condition?
His condition was he wouldn't have to campaign against anybody for it. They just handed it to him.
Well, I don't think he's going to get that same deal if he reverses himself and runs for the nomination. Anyway, Tom, got to let you go. And I want to get on to this story. As you know, there's this pending motion to lift a restraining order on the actual database of clients of the D.C. Madam Deborah Jean Palfrey. And the lawyer, Montgomery Sibley, who unfortunately, sadly, has said his schedule has filled up and he doesn't know when he's going to be able to do our show, but we're still trading emails. But basically, in his last motion, he's still trying to play the game by the legal rules. And in his last motion, he has released some of the information that's in that database. Now, he didn't name any individuals because that is actually the subject of the restraining order. You will not name names. But he did include a list of 174 institutions who used the D.C. Madam's services as part of an exhibit on his latest filing. And it is very obvious why they want that restraining order to stay in place. Because the various agencies and institutions who use the DC Madam services includes the FBI, the IRS, the State Department, the Department of Commerce, the Embassy of Japan, Lockheed Martin, Price Waterhouse Coopers, Hewlett-Packard, and the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. So you can imagine some of the names of individuals that are on that list. And at this point, I say there is no way in the dark regions they're going to ever lift that restraining order. And I hope Sibley is taking precautions, because this secret is what got Deborah Jean Palfrey murdered. And when she was on my radio show, when she was on all the talk radio shows at the time, she said, if I'm found dead, it is not a suicide. So we'll see where that goes. All right, moving on here. So as you probably already heard, House Speaker Paul Ryan rules out presidential bid at a contested convention. Of course, Paul Ryan ruled out being Speaker of the House just before he got that job, for what it's worth. Former House Speaker Dennis Hastert, as it turns out, will not be charged for molesting 4 boys, one of whom he paid $3.5 million in blackmail money over the years, which is what led to his being charged with structuring to conceal those payments here. Now, the Panama Papers are still very much in the news. You've got a bunch of people trying to spin them to their own political advantage. You've got other people saying, oh, it's nonsense. It's a CIA plot. Pay no attention to what's going on over there. But an article coming out of reader-supported news, according to Oxfam, most of the World Bank's private investments are linked to these tax havens. And they're estimating it is costing the developing countries $100 billion every year of money that should be there to try and develop those countries, and it's not. It's gone. It's looted. It's plundered. More about the Panama Papers when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're talking about the Panama Papers scandal, and everybody's trying to spin it. Others are trying to discredit it and say, oh, it's a plot. You shouldn't pay attention to that. Yeah, we should be paying attention to that. Now, remember, it's called the Panama Papers because the particular law firm that these documents were leaked from or hacked from has its headquarters in Panama. But it's actually in a lot of countries, and their offices in El Salvador got raided yesterday. So there's more information to come. But this is a global situation, and that's the part you need to keep in mind. So we're talking about this article about Oxfam. They're estimating that some $7.6 trillion of wealth is hidden, and it's generating income on which no taxes are being paid. And they're estimating that if, in fact, taxes were being paid on the income generated by this hidden wealth, it would provide an extra $190 billion to various governments around the world. And that is a lot of money. Now, BBC has been treading very lightly on this story. They're editorializing, oh, yes, we have to, it's time to crack down on tax avoidance. Turns out they've got 84 million pounds stashed in a tax haven in Bermuda. Remember the article we were talking about the other day where The Guardian had a problem? They were caught up in this whole thing. It's all politicians, rich people, corporations. They've all got these loopholes where they don't have to pay taxes. The Red Cross has shown up in the Panama Papers. And they're worried about a damage to their reputation. They should be. The CIA was using Mossack Fonseca to conceal their financial activity as part of their clandestine efforts. Remember, the CIA was up to their neck in the BCCI scandal. Now, there's an article here that came out of Medium.com which really hits it on the head. It's a criminal economy. And it says, naming and shaming these tax dodgers isn't enough. We have to go after that wealth. And people are very angry about this, especially as we come up on tax filing deadline in this country. Because we have this insane hypocrisy of government saying, oh, we're in debt, we're in debt, we're in debt. You've all got to pay higher taxes to pay the interest on the national debt, and we can't spend it on roads or bridges or schools or hospitals. We just have to keep the bankers happy. And then you find out the politicians have passed all these laws to make it legal for them to hide their money outside the country. They've made an escape hatch for themselves and their very rich friends. And that shortfall on tax revenue gets dumped on you. And there's another aspect. When we're talking about trillions in hidden wealth, and by the way, that Oxfam number is the lowest I've heard. I've heard estimates up to $30 trillion in wealth is now being hidden. And that is wealth that could be used to invest in infrastructure and building industries and reviving our economy, but it's no longer available. The Panama Papers, that law firm, it's like a money motel. Money checks in, but it doesn't check out. They're just taking wealth out of this country, and nothing comes back for it. Nothing whatsoever. Now, up in Canada, the Canada Revenue Agency asked the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation to hand over their copies of the offshore tax haven data. And the news organization is refusing because, after all, the purpose of the establishment media is to protect the wealthy. Very interesting article coming out of The Guardian. Politicians don't know the price of milk, but they do know how to set up shell companies. Absolutely true. By the way, the Iran-Contra scandal has been found inside these records. They go back 40 years. There's a lot of dirt in there. Remember Iran-Contra? The CIA, George Herbert Walker Bush, were smuggling guns without serial numbers down to Nicaragua to support the Contras, and they were paying for it all with cocaine being smuggled back into the United States of America, and apparently the records of their financial dealing, how they laundered all that money, that's in those papers as well. Now, we know there was an American side to the money laundering. It was called the Resolution Trust Corporation, Morgan Guarantee, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, and all these land flipping deals. Whitewater, Flowerwood, Castle Grande. So there may yet be a direct link from all of this to Hillary Clinton. But that's the part that you should really be angry about. You live in a world where you're constantly being told that you have to pay more taxes, you have to pay more taxes, and then you find out the people demanding those taxes have created themselves an escape hatch so they don't have to. Isn't that cool? What a wonderful system. The working people pay for everything, and the rich just live lives of wealth and comfort and prosperity. Do you know Christine Lagarde doesn't pay any taxes on the money she makes from the IMF? It's in her contract. The Federal Reserve, a privately owned bank, pays no taxes on their economic activity other than taxes on the property their banks sit on. That's actually in the Federal Reserve Charter. You begin to get the idea of what a scam this all is? It's just a license to plunder the people under color of law. And I'm not even getting into the issue that nobody can actually prove that 16th Amendment was ever properly ratified. It's all a gigantic scam, and you should be furious. All right, getting over to the war zones. As Ukraine collapses, Europeans tire of U.S. interventions, and they're talking about how Prime Minister Yatsenyuk just resigned 4 days after the Dutch referendum voted against Ukraine joining the European Union. And then you have the talk of the Brexit, the Frexit, the Grexit, the Drexit. And it's basically showing that Europeans are losing their enthusiasm for globalism and certainly losing their enthusiasm for Washington, D.C.'s addiction to interventionism because they're looking at a real possibility of yet another world war fought in their front yards. And they are not enthusiastic about that. Now, do you remember South Ossetia? There was a little bit of a kerfuffle over there. Saakashvili flexing his muscles about you're part of my empire. Well, South Ossetia is going to hold a referendum on joining with Russia. The U.S. is losing this game And for a very simple reason. Russia's making deals. All the U.S. knows how to make anymore is war, death, and destruction. We've lost our manufacturing. Even our vaunted military products are being exposed as poor in quality and effectiveness and very, very much overpriced. And nobody wants our GMO agriculture. Now, over in Iraq, they're going through a serious political upset. The Prime Minister of Iraq created what he called a technocrat cabinet to basically be another layer in the government supposedly to deal with the corruption that is rampant throughout this U.S. puppet regime. And by the way, every U.S. puppet regime is corrupt. They know they're there as overseers and masters of somebody else's home. And yeah, they're open to corruption, or they wouldn't be there in the first place. So the members of Parliament are out there trying to figure some way they can legally destroy this cabinet, and the entire government is trembling at the foundations. But Defense Secretary Ash Carter is insisting that all of the political turmoil in Baghdad won't impede the U.S. escalating the war in Iraq. We're going back into Iraq. Huzzah, huzzah. This is what, 5-6 times now? Because those pesky Iraqi people won't stay conquered. What's wrong with them? They don't understand how this is supposed to work. They don't follow the rules that we just made up to enslave the world. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And during the commercial break, I was paging through Sibley's latest motion, especially that Exhibit B section where he lists these 174 agencies and institutions, and I can see why everybody is nervous about this. Department of Health and Human Services is in there, the Coast Guard, the Post Office, the Forestry Service. I mean, it's just, hey, Washington, D.C., what a party town that is. Alrighty, getting on back to the wars. The Minnesota National Guard is being deployed to Egypt for 9 months. They're taking 400 soldiers from the Minnesota Army National Guard's Mankato-based 2nd Battalion for a 9-month peacekeeping mission to the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. So they're expecting something to blow up over there. So much for 2 weeks a year and 1 weekend a month. Story coming out of Washington's blog. U.S. and Saudis causing hundreds of thousands of children to starve to death in Yemen. Now, Saudi Arabia is acting as the U.S. proxy in Yemen. They're about to learn how little loyalty there is as the U.S. tries to blame them for 9/11. But the Saudi and American military are committing war crimes left and right. They're hitting civilians. It's a tragedy. It's absolutely a tragedy. Now, the Saudis have responded to that 60 Minutes report on the 9/11 link and saying it's absolute nonsense. And it is. And again, what I've been saying throughout the years, to find out if you're being lied to, look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't there is a motive for Saudi Arabia to do something like that. Saudi Arabia has made huge amounts of money off the petrodollar deal. They've invested much of that money in the United States. They're not going to do anything that would allow the U.S. government to say, oh, that's our money now, we're just going to keep it. And that money is also a potent weapon. If Saudi Arabia got it into their heads to hurt the United States of America, they don't need to crash airplanes into buildings to do it. All they got to do is start taking their money back. And the U.S. economy will implode. And it would be perfectly legal and moral for Saudi Arabia to do that. Why wouldn't that be their weapon of choice? There was actually a movie about this possibility called Rollover. It was back in the 1970s, where the whole point of the film was how dependent the U.S. economy had become on all this Saudi money. And that's part of the petrodollar deal. The Saudis sell their oil only for U.S. dollars, and they invest those dollars back in the United States. And it's billions and billions and billions of dollars. I'm starting to do my Carl Sagan impression. Billions and billions of dollars wafting across the ocean into the U.S. economy. And they could ask for it back. So this idea that Saudi Arabia did 9/11 is nonsense. Now, it is entirely possible that Saudi Arabia was working with the United States and Israel on 9/11. But trying to drop the blame on it, the blame for 9/11 on Saudi Arabia, it doesn't pass the smell test. It doesn't. Now, down in Israel, things are getting nasty down there. We're getting a story out of IMMC.org. The army, without warning and explanation, is dumping rubble and sand on Palestinian farmlands near Bethlehem. They're basically killing the plants and making the ground unusable for farming. And no explanation, no advance notice. They're just going on in there with the trucks and dumping the sand and rubble to ruin the farm. So the farmers will leave and they can say, oh, look, land for us to take. Another article coming out of Middle East Eye. Israel is launching a tourism project called the Bible Trail so that Christians can walk and visit all of these holy sites that were declared to be holy sites by St. Helena. Nobody actually knows where any of this stuff in the Bible actually happened, but after Constantine declared Christianity Rome's official religion, the Empress Helen was sent down there, and she just walked around and said, okay, the manger was over there, and the cross was over there, and the tomb was over here, and she even claimed to have found a piece of the true cross and resurrected a dead man with it. But that's where all these place names come from. There's no archaeological evidence to support any of the claims. It's by imperial edict from ancient Rome. And so Israel is going down, and they're making a new tourism causeway, if you will, to link all these sites together, and in the process, they're grabbing more Palestinian land under the guise of heritage and tourism. Story coming out of Oxfam again, demolition escalates in the West Bank. They're putting pedal to the metal. They're trying to basically draw the facts on the ground ahead of a possible forced settlement, which may be coming because Abbas is going to mount yet another resolution in the UN Security Council saying it's time to get this peace process going on a two-state solution. And the way that Israel is fighting that is they're breaking what is left of Palestine up into little tiny non-contiguous chunks so that they can say, there isn't a piece of land big enough for a Palestinian state. Look, it's just these little tiny, bit here and bit there and bit there. Well, you did it. Well, yeah, but still, there's no piece of ground that can be a Palestinian state. Now, will the U.S. veto the resolution of the Security Council? The expectation would be. But remember, Barack Obama is in his last term in office. He can't run for re-election. He doesn't need anything from Israel. And he may be looking at an opportunity to pay Netanyahu back for that shameless grandstanding that Netanyahu did during the P5+1 negotiations, where Netanyahu addressed a joint session of Congress, and Congress were up there cheering and screaming at him because they'd been told by AIPAC if they didn't applaud Netanyahu, they wouldn't get any AIPAC money for this year's election. So they're up there banging their hands together like trained circus seals. And it was an affront to Barack Obama, and Obama may feel that since he's only got a few more months on the job anyway, we're just going to sit back and let the Security Council pass the resolution. Now let's talk about the economy here. This is very, very alarming, coming out of Zero Hedge. The average German bond yield has crashed to zero for the first time ever. That is significant. Now there's a very alarming story. This is a flashback to 2013, and it tells you where these private bankers are going. Back in 2013, the International Monetary Fund suggested that governments that were heavily indebted to the IMF directly confiscate the wealth of the citizens. They're not talking about higher taxation. They're literally saying, if you owe too much money to the IMF, you just grab all the factories and homes and everything, and you just give it to us, and we'll rent it back to the people. And even then, they said this would not pay off the debt, it would just keep the economy sustainable. As a new version of feudalism and serfdom. That's their idea. They want a world where these private central banks own absolutely everything, and you spend your entire life working as hard as you can to be granted the nobles' permission to live on their lands, in their houses, to wear their clothing, to drive their cars and work in their factories. That's the world they're trying to get back to. Feudalism, where the land owns the people rather than the people owning the land. Now, Bernanke's former advisor, let's see, I have misplaced the name. Anyway, Bernanke's former advisor came on out saying something that we've already known all along. People would be stunned to know the extent to which the Federal Reserve is privately owned. The propaganda has always been, oh, it's the Federal Reserve, it's part of the government, the chairman is approved by, the president. No, it isn't. The Federal Reserve is a privately owned central bank. It's no more federal than Federal Express. They're trying to pretend to be part of the government to fool you all. That's what it is. It's a hoax. It's another scam to make you think this is the way the world is supposed to be. All right, we're going to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials. And when we come on back, more news about the economic indicators. So we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we got a bunch of callers who have been waiting very, very patiently to get on the air. So let's start taking phone calls. Peter in California. Aloha, what's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I wanted to call and kind of link together some of the things one thing that you talked about yesterday and with another thing you've talked about in the past, and that was the basic topic is the complete lawlessness of our law enforcement organs, FBI, local police, whatever. But the civil asset forfeiture, the policing for profit article that was run in the Washington Post was said that in 2014, the police confiscated and basically stole more property from American citizens than all the burglars did.
Yes.
Combine that with what you said yesterday, Mike, about was it the Ninth Circuit or
yeah,
whatever?
The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which basically said it's okay for the police to lie to you and pull you over and say you got a broken taillight or something, and then they can go ahead and search your car for contraband of some kind. And very clearly, this is a violation of our right against unreasonable search and seizure. Of course, the court is just saying, oh, it's perfectly reasonable for the police to make up a story and go on a hunch. And it's absolutely contrary to the Bill of Rights.
Well, and then you also talked about yesterday implanting kiddie porn on political activists.
Yes.
Which I think you and I have discussed on your show about that's probably what happened to Scott Ritter, the guy who was the whistleblower on the weapons inspector in Iraq thing when they tried to get him out of the way. That's how they got him. But when you put all that stuff together, the fact that they can imprison you without a trial, they can put you on no-fly lists without any recourse whatsoever or any reason. Obama claims the right to murder you. The police can stop you for any reason and steal everything that you have.
And for no reason. That's what the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. They don't need a reason anymore. They can just make one up.
And all this stuff is going on, and yet, Hastert gets off, Hillary gets off, this haircut stuff that's upcoming for us. In Panama,
we're paying taxes. The rich people aren't. That's the reality of the world that we live in. It is as corrupted as any Renaissance city-state. That's how bad it is. Yeah.
At any rate, I just wanted to tie a couple things together that you've already talked about. So that's it for me, Mike. But it's scary, man.
It should be angering. Don't let yourself be afraid. If you're afraid, they win. But go ahead and be angry. It's overdue. All right, we're going to switch over here to Glenn in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Glenn. Thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, and then they forced Ritter to do that trite TV show, Three's Company. I mean, that's just...
Come on. That's a slightly different guy. Different guy.
Oh, okay. About the Panama Papers money. Yeah, Mike, the money can check out anytime it wants. But it can never leave. And when they came for the papers, it screamed rape, you know. And of course you'll have to work Van Halen's Panama into your bumper music now.
Actually, somebody has sent. Yeah, you're right. Somebody already made that suggestion earlier today.
Right. I'm the guy who said the Darth Vader thing the other week about, you know, we have altered rules. Pray that we don't alter them further.
Yeah.
Boy, they sure did, didn't they?
Oh, they sure did, and they're still changing them left, right, up, and down. I'm expecting them to come on out and say that only dark-haired candidates can be considered for president at the GOP convention.
Rules? We don't need no stinking rules.
That's definitely the attitude, and the former chair of the GOP is saying that they're putting out this message that ordinary people don't matter anymore, and that's not a very good message to be putting out.
All right, take care, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thank you, and we're going to switch over to Wes in Idaho. Wes, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Michael. Wanted to ask if you're aware, wanted to comment on a wildly hot controversial 18-minute spot on YouTube called Why Women Destroy Nations and Civilizations by Black Pigeon Speaks. It is based a lot on a book by Professor Unwin of Oxford and Cambridge.
Mm-hmm.
His book, Sex and Civilization, he studied the subject quite exhaustively.
Well, I'll tell you one thing he didn't study. He didn't study Lysistrata, Aristophanes' comedy, which supposedly was based on a true story where the women of one of the Greek city-states simply went on sexual strike to stop a war. And I mean, this strikes me as extraordinarily absurd, but then, you know, Oxford, a lot of weird things come out of there. Anything else, Wes?
Well, I wanted you to see it. It's got 400,000 visits in less than 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
An 83% approval rating.
Well, I'll tell you what, Wes. I'll tell you what. I'll look at it, but right now, my first impression, based on the title, is this is some kind of bait being put out there to try and bring up sexism as a campaign issue for November, because the candidates certainly don't want to talk about the economy. They don't want to talk about the wars. They're trying to create issues, fringe issues that they can scream at each other over, like this LGBT, transgenders in the restrooms and abortions and the rest of it. Okay, and this feels like.
This reference you made to the Greek people, is that a play or is that an actual fact? Because I have Mr. Unwin's 650-page book sitting right here from Liberty.
Okay, well, Wes, I'll look at the video after the radio show today, but I got to be very honest, it's going to be a tough sell from where I sit.
I'm telling you, Michael.
Okay, bye-bye, Wes. Thank you. Okay, I mean, anyway. All right, John in Barbados, what's on your mind?
Michael, the current situation, I suggest we look on the back of the $1 bill. Ordo ab chaos. I think we're in the chaos at the moment, this New World Order chaos, and they're trying to... There's chaos in Europe with the immigration, there's chaos in the the elections in America, and the overreach of the police force in America.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I get the volume down for the cough. I apologize to everybody whose eardrums are bleeding. You know, anytime somebody wants to overthrow a nation, they deliberately cause chaos as part of the destabilization. We saw it when the U.S. went into Kiev, and we need to entertain the possibility that there is a deliberate destabilization campaign being waged against America to actually pave the way for the global government, because the New World Order and the United States government can't coexist. The New World Order requires bringing down every government on earth, including that of the United States of America, to pave the way for the new global order. And so it does seem like there's a lot of people causing chaos. Of course, politicians love chaos. We heard from Christine Lagarde. They love chaos. They make more money. And
well, I think the chaos has gone worldwide, Michael.
Well, yes, absolutely. And again, that seems to tie in with this idea of wanting to destroy national borders and bring about this New World Order global government, which I'm adamantly opposed to, because if you have a single throne for planet Earth, I mean, it's going to attract the very worst of humankind to want to sit on it, and we're going to be permanently enslaved to a global central bank, and there will be no more social evolution or development because all governments preserve the status quo. And if there's no place to go and set up a new experimental society, then civilization's evolution will come to an absolute dead stop. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I did go over to the YouTube page for that video Wes suggested, and it's a very long video. It's got a lot of likes. It's got a lot of dislikes. But judging by the comments, I think I was bang spot on. This is an attempt to divide men and women, and they've also got a thing in there about the Muslims as well, to break us all up and get us arguing with each other for political gain. And who is it who's running on a campaign of winning the vagina vote? So I think that's where this may have come from. I'll watch the whole thing later on, but this looks like campaign season. Let's fan up an argument among the people, because people who are getting along with each other can't be exploited for votes. We've got to get them to hate each other, and then we'll promise to protect them from each other, and that's how we get our votes. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Janet in Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. This concerns Barack Obama bringing in hundreds of thousands of Muslim migrants to different states, and your mainstream prostitutes are not telling the American people about it naturally. And I believe that's Congress's job, not the president's ability to do that. And I think the American people need to know that, because what's going on throughout Europe with the rape and with all the crime is going to be happening here.
I'm absolutely in agreement, and it's not just the Muslim refugees. It's the illegal immigrants from south of the border, and the grand plan seems to be they're going to blur all the population of planet Earth together, so that we lose our sense of cultural or historical identity, and we all hold hands around the campfire and sing Kumbaya and then go off to work for the New World Order. Unfortunately, it's not working out very well because of the hostilities that this forced intermixing is generating. And then when you have Sarkozy coming on out like he did last week and said, well, we can solve all this by mandating interracial reproduction, and we have to use coercive methods by the state. In other words, Sarkozy is arguing for the state to have the authority to take a person of this race and command them to have babies with a person of that other race. And I mean, that's how just completely over the top all of this is. And
I have 3 guns, set them up, and I can shoot them. I am sick and tired of people like that being able to open their mouth to anyone. And I want the people out there to start calling Congress, start calling the people that are the prostitutes and telling them we're well aware of what you're doing. You're not letting the people know what's going on, and we're sick and tired of it. They're treasonous. It's all about destroying our national sovereignty. That's what it's about. It's about the New World Order. It's about George Soros. It's about Angela Merkel destroying her country. It's about all the rape and murder going on. All you have to do is turn on any alternate media, any of the videos on alternate media on your computer, and you can see what is going on. Women throughout Europe being told, cover your arms and legs.
Yeah, I thought that blame the victim for being raped attitude went out with the 1980s. But apparently I'm wrong. And again, the reason this is failing miserably is because liberalism is based on this founding principle that who we are and how we feel is determined exclusively by the environment. That we're all born with an absolutely blank mind, and how we feel and how we think is all a result of the environment. And so the liberal justification for complete control over our environment is. They want to reshape our minds by that, hopefully in a better direction, or at least better for them. But it's a false premise. It all goes back to Margaret Mead's book, Coming of Age in Samoa, which was an academic fraud. And yet they still hold Margaret Mead up. They lionize her as a champion of liberal political philosophy. And the book was flat out wrong. And that's why all of these liberal attempts at a global society are slamming into brick walls.
I was shown something on someone's computer, a friend of mine recently, and it was Muslim migrants coming in someplace. It was one woman and two men on either side of her with 3 children. She was holding 2 children and holding on the hand of the 3rd child. She was barefooted. The men had shoes on. She was holding all 3 children. They were holding nothing. That's the culture they're coming in with. That's what they think of women.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, they're going to bring their culture with them. And the history of the heyday of immigration to the United States, when they put up the Statue of Liberty and said, give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And they came on in and they didn't assimilate fully. They had, Chinatown, Little Tokyo, Little Italy. They tend to stay with their own, and that's just human nature. And that's absolutely human nature. And this idea that they're going to somehow force us to just accept everybody's multiculturalism, and agree to have the government decide that we're going to have sex with people from, this other little ethnic group in order to create a blended population. I mean, that's how draconian and out of control this thing really is. Plus, there's one other factor. Okay, this immigration process acts as a filter. We're not getting the best of the people from those source nations. The best people in those nations are still sitting there. They've got jobs, they built businesses, they're happy where they are, they're not going to move. We're getting the people who couldn't make it in their home country. We're getting people who were fleeing prosecution. We are getting people who are in many cases carrying communicable contagious diseases, and Europe and the United States are starting to have to deal with diseases that had been eradicated in these places 10 years ago, and now all of a sudden they're popping up again. We're getting the dregs sent to us, and these other countries are laughing. Mexico's laughing at us. They're just emptying their prisons and sending them across the border. We're getting all these drug gang members coming into the United States of America. It's an absolute unmitigated disaster for the American people.
Yes. There's one thing I want to mention about what happened in Colorado that I heard from the radio. I forget the guy, you know him. It was said that Colorado was originally set up for Jeb Bush. That whole thing was set up for Jeb Bush. That's why it was set up that way.
Okay. Well, it's a mess. I mean, again, it almost feels like this election season, they don't care if we know they're rigging the election. It's like they're thumbing their nose at us and saying, you're not in control anymore. The party rules everything. Sig Heil, Sig Heil. Anyway, listen, Janet, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We still have not heard any word from New Jersey on this lawsuit regarding Ted Cruz's eligibility to be president. It's basically the end of the day there, and I think they're going to wait till the dead of night to come out with a decision. And there's a giveaway already, because according to Patch.com, the judge in this case, Mason, is quoted as saying the phrase natural born doesn't mean a person was born in the United States. Okay, well, Judge, what do you think it means? And why is it only applied to the president and not members of Congress? Now, we know what natural born means. It was defined in the Law of Nations, which was used as the legal reference for the writing of the Constitution. We know what they mean, that natural born means born in the United States of America, because that requirement was put in the Constitution at the suggestion of Chief Justice John Jay, who said the goal is to never allow the military forces of the United States to be under the control of somebody born in another country. And again, if they go along with this argument that any American born anywhere on earth can be president, then we go back to that thought experiment of an American woman who moves to the Soviet Union in the 1950s, has a child who was raised and indoctrinated in the Soviet Union throughout their teenage years. Then the mother moves back to the United States of America, and that kid runs for the White House. Does that sound like something that maybe the Founding Fathers didn't want to have happen? Remember, the Founding Fathers had a good grasp of history, and they had seen how much of the turmoil and wars and strife in Europe came from having all these rulers who were family relations and were being shipped all over to different kingdoms and wound up with nations that were being ruled by rulers who didn't even speak the indigenous language. And they wanted to avoid that for our country. And Judge Mason is simply showing us once again how completely corrupted our system has become. They don't want to play by the rules. Rules are for you little people. Rules are for the slaves. Well, my opinion is if they're not playing by the rules, then they're not a legitimate government, and we should just ignore them from now on. All righty, let's grab ourselves some phone calls. Neil in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was listening to your show yesterday, and you were kind of on the same topic about Trump and Cruz. And, you know, as much as we dislike what the GOP is doing, I'm starting to think that this is all part of a bigger plan. We all know that they hate Trump. They also hate Cruz. Obviously, for them, Cruz is the better of the two. But what if, this is what I kind of wanted your idea on, what if they were intentionally letting Cruz run to siphon the votes for Trump, knowing that once he gets into the general election with Hillary, she's going to file, you know, to have him taken off the ballot, and then they can put in a Paul Ryan or something like that. But it takes
No. Once the GOP has picked a nominee, if he's disqualified by the courts, the GOP doesn't get to come back with, curtain number 2. And Hillary may not even need to file a lawsuit. Hillary knows she can just steamroller over Ted Cruz. That's what she's wanted all along. She didn't want to run against Donald Trump. Remember, Hillary Clinton got a hands-on education in dirty tricks election campaigns when she worked on the Watergate Committee, and she's playing exactly the same game that Richard Nixon's creep, the committee to re-elect the president, was playing, sabotaging the opposition candidates who presented a real challenge to leave their candidate running against somebody who was easy to beat. In Nixon's case, it was George McGovern. Nobody could understand how McGovern got the nomination until they learned afterwards that Nixon's people had been sabotaging all of the other candidates Nixon did not want to run against. Hillary's playing the same game. She wants to run against Ted Cruz. She's scared of running against Donald Trump. And she's playing the same game all over again.
What's surprising to me is how, I mean, I know Trump hasn't been necessarily quiet on this whole thing with, Colorado and everything, but I don't know if he's trying to figure out, how to play the game a little bit, which is why, now talking about Rubio and Kasich being okay guys, but it just seems like, they're really, going out on a limb here by pushing Cruz this hard. And I don't think that they're stupid. These people, they might be out of touch, but I don't think that they're really that stupid. There's got to be something going on in their head, where they think that they're going to.
Well, you'd like to think so. You'd like to think so, and that's a blindness that calm, reasonable people have. Is they think everybody else is thinking the same way. But when you get to that level of wealth and power, you will find that they want to believe, and sometimes they get so caught up in their beliefs and their dogma that they really are not capable of critical analysis anymore. In fact, if there's one hallmark we have seen in U.S. foreign policy over the last several years, is it is very obvious they don't think any of these policies all the way through to possible outcomes. They just have an idea. We'll start an oil price war with Russia. It'll be great. And then it backflashes and everybody's pointing fingers. Oh, it's your fault. You let this happen.
Trump's a pretty tough guy. Do you really think that he's, that they're going to be able to pull all these stunts off with stealing the delegates like they are with Bernie?
They're already doing it. At this point, it looks like they're going to get their brokered convention, and Trump is going to be kicked out, and they're going to shove somebody else at us that Hillary Clinton can just roll right over.
And do you think that he'll be able to make a strong third-party run at it?
No, the system's rigged against the third party. I mean, they'll go in November, with all these electronic machines, and they'll just steal the election for whoever the anointed leader is going to be the next time. That's how bad things are in this country. There's election fraud, there's delegate fraud, there's voter suppression. I mean, it's wide open on display. The elections in the U.S. are now worse than they were in the old Soviet Union.
The only thing good I can say about all this is that I kind of became a political atheist, so to speak, in 2008, 2012, because I was a big Ron Paul guy, and after that whole debacle with him, I kind of threw my hands up. But the way that they changed the rules for him, where you had to win, 5 primaries or 5 states, and now it's 8 states, but they're gonna reverse that probably. Was it like rule number 40 or something like that? I gave up to politics anyway. Any change, meaningful change through politics after I saw what happened to Ron Paul. So the only good thing I can say is that now people on both sides of the aisle, the Trump supporters and the Bernie supporters, are going to both get railroaded with these establishment people, and hopefully, everybody starts waking up thinking, this might not be the most expedient way to change. It might be more to do with civil disobedience, any other kind of activism. But,
well, you remember what John F. Kennedy said? Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And I'm afraid he's about to be proved right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your insights, Michael. It's always a pleasure to hear you on the radio.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. I may have to take you through this next commercial break, but what's on your mind?
Okay. Mike, I don't know if you've gotten that book by Roger Stone about Jeb Bush and the Bush crime family. It is excellent. You were talking before about the Iran-Contra. He goes into it very thoroughly, Iran-Contra. Just finishing the book up now, and it's worse than I ever thought it would. I mean, you actually got fits taking place all over the place, ordered by HW and even by Jeb Bush. Oliver North, who I used to admire, obviously is a dirtbag.
Yes.
If anything is really true. And as far as what I believe is going on right now, I believe
all right,
that
Mark, going to have to put you on hold for 4 minutes. We'll be right back and we'll pick up just where you left off. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go back to Mark in North Carolina. We're talking about Roger Stone. You're talking about the history of Iran-Contra. And what is amazing is just how widespread that scandal was. There was another book. It's very hard to find now. It's called Compromised, Clinton Bush and the CIA by Terry Reid, who was one of the actual operatives in the Iran-Contra operation. Then you had the other article, The Crimes of Mina, by Sally Denton and Roger Morris, had been written for the Washington Post. And after it was fact-checked and cleared for publication by the Washington Post lawyers, it was spiked by the Washington Post managing editor Bob Kaiser, who was a Skull and Bones alumni and good brother to George Bush. And ultimately, the article was published at Penthouse, and of course the establishment media said, well, if it's in Penthouse, you don't have to listen to that. But it was all based on documents recovered from Barry Seal. This was a huge scandal, and what's important is that we look back on it now and realizing this is how the U.S. government has been operating all along. When it goes into a country to destabilize it and impose a puppet regime, this is how it's played. And they're all making money along the route. They were all getting rich on cocaine money. The biggest drug dealer in the country is the country. Anyway, Mark, please take it away.
Yeah, actually, Jeb Bush was actually using that coke too, and most likely his brother was too. Barry Seal, this is what Barry Seal was trying to actually blackmail HW while he was vice president, but HW had him rubbed out. He actually had him rubbed out. Supposedly he was shot by cartel members, the Medellin cartel.
Yeah.
But they later on admitted that they were actually hired by Oliver North. I mean, I'm really disgusted with North. I really respected the man at one time.
Well, they knew that Barry Seal was making a deal with drug enforcement in the United States, and he had documentation about what was going on. So they found a corrupt judge that literally ordered Barry Seal to be living in a specific location and forbid him from having guns or personal guards. So, of course, he was a sitting duck when he turned up. And everybody thought that was the end of it. But Sally Denton and Roger Morris found Barry Seal's stash of documents, and that's what they went to the Washington Post with. The person who was really trying to blackmail George Bush over the Iran-Contra gun and drug running was Manuel Noriega, which is why they invaded Panama, and now they've got Noriega making license plates at a prison in Miami.
I'm surprised they didn't knock off Noriega, though. I know, I realize that he was. I'm surprised they didn't, because
they were trying to send a message to other world leaders not to try and blackmail the U.S. government, unless, of course, you're Israel, and then, of course, it's perfectly okay for you to blackmail the U.S. government. But that's what they wanted to demonstrate. We will come into your country, we will take your head of state, we'll throw him in an American prison, and nobody will be able to do a thing about it. That was the message they were sending out.
Bush actually, what I find out is that the Bushes, and actually the Clintons too, have used the United States military as their enforcers, as their personal enforcers to close their business deals and enforce their business deals.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that goes all the way back to remember what Smedley Butler said about the racket. Yeah, that's what the U.S. military are used for, to go on out and steal other people's property and, protect corporate interests and overthrow governments who won't go along with what the U.S. wants them to do. War is a racket.
Yeah, but in the case of the Bushes and the Clintons, you actually had people like this becoming president and ordering the military to do it. They didn't have to have a middleman or anything like that. They didn't have to lean on a president. They did it themselves. But HW did it to help his buddies in the Saudi Arabia there. With Saddam Hussein, the first Iraq War.
Well, no, that wasn't done primarily for Saudi Arabia. Basically, the U.S. was looking for a reason to start taking Saddam Hussein down because he was starting to strain at his leash. And that was the reason that the U.S. sent a diplomatic message to Iraq that they would look the other way if Iraq wanted to go on in and grab a piece of Kuwait, because Kuwait had been caught slant drilling underneath the Iraq border and stealing Iraq's oil. Of course, it was all a setup. As soon as Saddam went into Kuwait, Desert Storm, and they went on in, and they smashed his weapons, destroyed Gerald Bull's super cannon, and it was just a typical double cross by the U.S. government. And then later on in 2002, when Saddam got permission from the UN to sell Iraq's oil for the euro, that was a direct threat to the petrodollar deal, and that's why they started screaming nuclear weapons, and they went on in and finished Saddam off. It's all driven by money.
Yeah, but let's not forget, though, that the Bushes have a business partnership with the Saudis, not only with the Saudi royal family, but with the Bin Ladens themselves. They were having a breakfast with Bin Ladens in Boston. Matter of fact, HW is having breakfast with the Bin Ladens in Boston the day of 9/11.
Yeah, it's all one big band of brothers, and they only put on differences in public. It's like professional wrestling, where they're in the ring snarling at each other, and then you see them out in the parking lot going home, and they're shaking hands and, clapping each other on the back at how clever they are to have fooled that audience into thinking that it's real.
I mean, Bin Laden actually had a CIA name for him.
Tim Osman.
Okay. He probably was working all along for the CIA.
Oh, he definitely was. I mean, George W. Bush had a partnership, Arbusto Energy, with Osama bin Laden's older brother, Salim bin Laden, who died in a mysterious small plane crash. Yeah, it's all one big band of crooks around the globe. And they only maintain the illusion of adversarial relations so that they can get your support and your tax dollars and prepare for war and get your kids to go on off and extend politics by other means. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go, Mark. Okay, I got to let you go here because Terry in South Dakota has been waiting very, very patiently, and I want to get to you before top of the hour break. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just want to know who is calling the shots to have leverage over these leaders in Europe, like Angela Merkel? Who told her let all these refugees in, and when she did, it's all these young males in their 20s and 30s coming in, not families. Who's calling the shots?
Well, it's not necessarily a case of somebody issuing orders so much as world leaders are supporting the rush to a new world order because they see themselves as part of that new global government structure. Angela Merkel would like to perhaps imagine that she's going to be in charge of the entire European district under the new world order. And this is how their allegiance and obedience is bought, or they've simply been given cash payments to do what they're told, or they're being blackmailed. Blackmail is a very well-worn, overused tool of foreign policy statecraft.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe they were using some kind of financial leverage, like on the monetary system for the country, or
that could very well be. I mean, we just had the IMF come on out exposed for threatening to destroy Greece's fragile economy unless Greece agrees to more austerity, which is banker speak for take more away from the people and give it to us.
Yeah, everything you said about Merkel applies over here, too, to Hillary and the Bushes.
Well, Hillary doesn't need to be blackmailed. She's she's very happy with the bribery setup.
No, I mean, they think they're going to be part of this New World Order scheme where they're going to have power and all that sort of thing you mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah, I think if they ever do establish this New World Order, we can look for a new knight of the long knives, because whoever's at the top of that isn't going to want any competition.
But I think, doesn't it all stem from the world bankers and the Rothschild banking cartel, and Israel's their favorite son?
Well, the agenda for the bankers is to permanently entrap the world in private central banking and to basically erase from human memory that there's another way to be running national economies. That's their goal.
Yeah, but isn't that in concert with the New World Order people that, have this big plan?
Well, they're all working together on it, each for their own purposes. Some want, glory and power of being ruler of the entire planet. The bankers want a single global central bank so that there's no possibility of escape from slavery. And that's what's driving them all forward. They're seeing endless riches and privileges and power and comfort. And there's a lot of people who are understanding it's coming down to a schism between the haves and the have-nots. And there are people who just want to be part of the haves, and they don't care what compromises morally they have to make.
Yeah, but isn't there a coordinating group that coordinates all this stuff, that promises people like Local?
I don't think so, because we've seen too many of the agendas collide head-on. I think it's a loose association, but I think this idea of a single coordinating, controlling authority, I don't see that there's actually one yet. All right, we got to take a break for our news. We got to take a break for our news and commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We're now getting word that a New York One Baruch College poll of New York State Republicans shows Donald Trump with a 43-point lead over Ted Cruz. And I mention that because I want you to remember that story that came out last week, where supposedly the chairman of the GOP was overheard issuing orders to use the crooked election machines to keep Trump under 50% for New York, so that they could basically say, well, Trump can't even win his home state. I mean, how really? Well, it's going to be very hard to overcome a 43-point lead without everybody knowing that that's exactly what just happened. See, election fraud, you can shift a contest a few points one way or the other, but when you try and reverse a landslide, everybody knows what happened. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. John in Oklahoma, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Hope you're doing good. I wanted to get your opinion or your thoughts on, do you think that with all these war zones and everything, do you think that the American military, probably not the American military so much because they probably know a little bit more, but the American people are probably being set up for the U.S.'s own Stalingrad? See that?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I don't think we're being set up for it, but there's absolutely no question that this policy of conquest of the world's resource-rich areas is way behind schedule and way over budget, and we know that stockpiles have been drawn down, and we keep getting these reports that our soldiers in the field don't really have all the equipment they're supposed to have. There are critical shortages on things like guns, and the U.S. is really exhausted economically, militarily, and they're losing this war already. They're losing, and yet they're still hot and bothered to get wars with Russia and China going. Europe's fed up with all of this warmongering. The American people are fed up with all the warmongering. And at some point, the U.S. is suffering defeats. They're trying to spin their way out of it, but the U.S. basically lost their effort to invade and conquer Syria. I don't think they've given up. I think there's going to be some kind of a false flag to justify a full-on ground invasion of Syria, or they may be planning a decapitation strike against Assad himself. But they've gone too far down this plan to turn around and go back. If the U.S. government were to say, all right, we're quitting this policy, we're turning around and going back, the U.S. economy would implode the next day. So they're stuck. They're in a corner. Plus, a lot of our leaders are looking at war crimes trials for what has been going on, the torture, the drone strikes on civilians, and the only way they're going to evade prosecution at the International Criminal Court is a war in which they are the victors.
Yeah, and like you said, not only the stockpiles are down, but the equipment is really, it's looking like it's really junk when it's compared to, what's made by the other countries. And
yeah, it is.
A lot more it might have a lot more technology and stuff like that. I watched this video that the U.S. Army came out with this gun that is going to pick a target and aim center mass every time. But it just, the concept doesn't seem feasible nor realistic because...
No, I think it's definitely possible to do it, but the U.S. government is making the same strategic mistake that the Nazis did toward the end of big mistake number 2, where they bet the war on these high-tech wonder weapons, which were high-tech and they were a wonder, but they couldn't produce them in enough volume to significantly change the outcome of the war.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They weren't really a wonder because it's not really a wonder weapon if the weapon can't really make it to the battlefield and breaks down on the way over there. You know what I mean?
Well, there's a lot of that going on. And, yeah.
Really? That's what I'm saying. Like, the Russians are building stuff that may not be, superior, but it's stupid and simple to operate. And it's effective.
That's it. When all wars are wars of attrition. And when you are wasting money the way the U.S. military-industrial complex wastes money, you're in trouble, especially when you're in a nation whose economy is already in serious, serious trouble. We don't have the economic resilience to overcome the short-sightedness of our military procurement system.
Yeah, did you hear that the U.S. troops in Egypt, now, they probably, I know ISIS is not really the issue, but it's like the propaganda they used to get in, but apparently they're being surrounded by somebody, and they have to use blitz of all things now to target these things, and that really struck me because it's like, but if you let me finish, it's like it's weird because it seems like they're setting it up, they're setting something up. Because you hear all this, like, oh, we still hear all the propaganda out there, even from the military. Oh, yeah, we still got it. But it's like, do they really? I mean, do they really?
I don't think they do. I mean, you look at the F-22, the F-35, the Independence and Freedom classes of littoral combat ships. They can't get the new whiz-bang toys on the Gerald Ford to work. It is. The American weapons are hideously overpriced. They're loaded up with all kinds of junk that slow them down, make them overweight, bloated behemoths. And Russia demonstrated in Syria. They're making more effective platforms at lower cost. And now, of course, the world is rushing to them to buy their S-400 air defense system. And China and Russia and these other countries, when they build weapons, their goal is building an effective weapon. Here in the U.S., it's just another money-making scam, where they'll take a platform and they just add everything they can to it because that drives up the cost, and they're all paying on what are called cost-plus contracts, where the more expensive they can make the weapon, the more money they're making off of it. And that's how you get things like the F-35 or the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And again, if you have not seen it, there's a wonderfully funny movie called The Pentagon Wars, directed by Richard Benjamin. And it's based on the true story of the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And they've done a very good treatment of it. It's very funny, but it does tell you exactly how these things are done in the United States. The goal isn't an effective weapon. It's making money. And another thing, you may want to go back and look at the M14 versus M16 debacle, where all these Pentagon officers were heavily invested in this one company that was making a rifle, and they tried to block the adoption of the M16. They deliberately sabotaged the tests by putting the wrong propellant in the cartridges, and kids got killed trying to use these sabotage guns in combat. But to the military brass, they don't care. You know, they oh, look, see, this guy got killed using this weapon. We can't have. And Congress had to intervene, which is why the M16 was finally adopted. But it's all about the money. It's not about making an effective military.
That's why I think in order for us as a people to get through this collapse, we're going to have to look at a little socialism ideas, because I think what they're expecting us to do is when the collapse comes for all of us to just destroy each other, because people think, oh, they're not going to work to maintain their infrastructure unless they get paid. And I think we really got to look beyond that and look at our survival instead of looking at what we can gain from it, because me helping... Oh,
I agree with you on that part. The model that I like to use is the collapse of the former Soviet Union. And the Russian people had to take care of themselves and each other. They had to be very cooperative for 3 to 4 months while they formed the new Russian republics. And life in the Russian republics got a lot better than it was under the Soviet Union. We're going to have to go through the same thing here, where we're going to have to be, networking and bonding with our friends and our neighbors and our local community and our streets and our blocks, and working together, barter systems, whatever, to take care of each other while we create a new government in this nation, which hopefully will be based on the original constitutional principles, along with one more that I want carved into granite: no more private central banks. Okay, we just lost our connection. All right, well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to go on talking to those people who are listening on BAM User, and for those who are making archive shows off of BAM User, and looks like we're going to be commercial-free for the rest of the show. Getting on back to the economy, U.S. commercial bankruptcies are suddenly soaring. Now, I know the stock market had a really good day, and we all know that the Federal Reserve just prints up and pours money all over Wall Street to make it look good, especially in an election year. But we're seeing more and more bankruptcies, commercial bankruptcies. Now, the other day we were talking about Urban Corp, which is a company that deals in luxury accommodations in New York City, and how they were showing signs of being on the edge of bankruptcy. Their lawyers had officially disconnected from them, various other things. Now we have this other article where the real estate developer, Ackman, has invested $90 million in a luxury development, and he can't find any customers. See, that's the problem with wealth inequality. When the money is all clustered at the top, commerce stops. Because ordinary people, middle-class people, working-class people, we're not buying things. We don't have the money to buy them with. And we don't want any more bank loans. And yes, the ultra-rich have all the wealth, but there's only a few of them. They can't run around to all the shopping malls and buy all the manufactured goods to keep the economy going. Another article coming out of shtfplan.com reminding us all that there is currently an estimated $3 trillion, with a T, dollar shortfall in the U.S. pension plans, the U.S. pension system. And the reason for that goes all the way back to 2008, when Wall Street was having fun with their mortgage-backed security fraud, and Wall Street's pet ratings agencies, like Fitch's and Standard & Poor's, were rating these mortgage bundles AAA, which made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. Pension funds are restricted by law to only investing in the absolute safest investments, because their customer base are elderly people who don't have the luxury of having time to start over and rebuild their lives. And so all these pension funds invested in these mortgage-backed securities, the whole fraud collapsed, and these pensions were suddenly defunded. And because we're not allowed to criticize bankers and Wall Street, and certainly not to send them to prison, the finger of blame was pointed on retired people. Oh, you're living too long. Really, it's your fault. You picked the wrong pension plan to be in. Another little article expressing concern over used car prices. Now, if you've been watching TV lately, you have probably seen all these commercials for cars. And they're great bargains. They can't move these things. It's amazing, some of the leasing prices. You know, if you have a reliable income, now's the time to buy or lease a new car. But there's also this other issue, and that's the used cars, the aftermarket cars. A lot of people, because of the tight economy, have been buying used cars because they think they're getting more of a bargain. And they really aren't when you consider the planned obsolescence issue, where high-end cars are designed and built to last only 8 years. 5 years for the original owner and only 3 for the aftermarket, the used car purchaser. Now they're looking about how used car prices are coming down. And that's creating a major, major problem. All right. Hillary Clinton is back on the warpath on guns. Guns are committing crimes. She actually said that. Guns are committing crimes. The machines have become self-aware. The guns want to destroy humanity. She doesn't talk about people. She doesn't talk about prescription antidepressants. It's the guns. And it's okay. Let her go on screeching and screaming about it because ever since Obama took office, the gun industry has grown 158%. It's one of the few areas of our economy that's doing really, really well. Because every time the gun grabbers start screaming, people go on out and they buy more guns. Now here's an interesting story. This is over in the Daily Sheeple. And it has to do with a CNN journalist who was going through an airport. And he had with him this little tube of pimento and cheese and mayonnaise to put on crackers to eat on the flight. And the TSA confiscated it. The TSA confiscated his little tube of pimento cheese. Doesn't that make you feel much safer? Do you realize in all their years of operation, all their years of fondling our wives and children, all the years of stealing our iPads, dropping and breaking laptops, which they did to me, ruined a perfectly good laptop. I didn't get an apology, let alone a replacement laptop. In all of that, TSA has never actually caught a real terrorist. Not one. Not one. Okay, it looks like we may be reestablishing. Our connection seems to be coming back. I'm going to log on in, and hopefully we will have a call from the control room to finish up the rest of our show. So we'll wait for that to happen. Meanwhile, April storm dumps heavy snow on northern Ohio. Heavy snow blanketed parts of northern Ohio. Good snow gives regional ski resorts a lift. This is from Idaho. And they're noticing something very bizarre. There are parts of this country who are getting more snow this April than they got December. Now remember, back in December, we still had the El Nino current was bringing a lot of warmth to the North American continent. But El Nino's got nothing to do with human activity. It's undersea volcanoes. So in northern Michigan, they got more snow this month, April, and we're only halfway through the month, than they got in December. Same thing with Pittsburgh. They had more snow. Now, over in the town of Cripple Creek, Colorado, they got hit with a big snowstorm that was sufficient to close the roads. And people had to basically stay there. Stay in the hotels, motels, with family, friends. Cripple Creek, Colorado has some casinos, and people just went and did that. But snow, April, halfway through April. Now, NASA is chiming in once again with their fear-mongering. And this is the latest one. NASA is now saying that global warming is changing how the Earth wobbles. And they're out there saying that melting ice sheets, especially in Greenland, are changing the distribution of weight on Earth. And that has caused the North Pole and the wobble to change course. The world is going to shake itself apart unless you pay carbon taxes. Now then, first of all, the ice sheet on Greenland isn't melting. Remember that guy from Greenpeace said in 20 years Greenland will be ice-free. It's actually got more ice. Yeah, there's ice falling off the edges into the ocean, which they love to take pictures of to prove that the Earth is warming, but there's more ice accumulating in the middle. And even if that entire ice mass were to vanish overnight, the change to the Earth's rotation is microscopic, can possibly be detected by very, very sensitive instruments, but we're not going to see skyscrapers falling down. But this is more of that fear-mongering. Remember what I said before about scientists when they discover something and they say, I've noticed this interesting phenomenon, probably doesn't mean all that much. They don't get media attention. They don't get more funding. But if that same scientist comes out and says, I've discovered this little phenomenon and it could potentially be the end of the world, then the media piles on and more funding shows up. That's how science has become corrupted. They want attention, they want more funding. And they understand that if they align with the current political agendas, they're going to get it. They're going to get it. So that's NASA's latest fear-mongering for human-caused global warming. The wobble is changing. Now, we have been talking this last week about how there's now a coalition of states' attorneys general, and they had a big meeting in New York. And they're not discussing crime in the streets. They're not discussing drug epidemics. They're not even discussing terrorism. They're discussing on how to use the law to punish anybody who questions the orthodoxy of human-caused global warming. They want to burn the heretics. Now, Obama came out with this odd comment that anybody who doubts human-caused global warming is a threat to national security. In a roundabout way, it is, because as snow continues to fall in this April, setting records, it's a reminder of just how much the U.S. government was hoaxing us all along with this global warming nonsense. And the awareness is growing that, yes, this was just another government scam to get our money and obedience. Story out of defund.com, why the climate change industry is a scam. And they're going on in and talking about how everybody who went along with this scam were richly rewarded with funding, with grants, with media exposure, book and movie deals. And let me see, I'm getting a phone call. Welcome to the world of professional radio. All right. You too can be a talk show host by enrolling in the Death Valley School of Broadcasting Arts and Sciences. If you would like to know if you have the qualifications to be a radio talk show host, ask yourself these 3 important questions. Do you have the $5,000 tuition to enroll in the Death Valley School of Broadcasting Arts and Sciences? If you don't have it, can you get it? And if you can't get it, why are you wasting my time? There we are! Oh my goodness! There we are. Watson, come here. I need you.
In America from being swept away by a skewed justice system.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we are back online with the Genesis control room. A little bit of an interruption there. Probably that mutant hamster got out of his cage again and chewed through a couple of wires. Okay, now then, getting on back to the news here. We're talking about human-caused global warming. We're talking about record-setting snow in April. And by the way, I think they knew this was going to happen. Remember on Groundhog Day, where the groundhog predicted, an early spring? And they didn't make the big deal about it in the media they have in years past, because they knew the groundhog was going to be wrong. Now, there's an article that's over in whatsupwiththat.com, Deep-Sixing Another Useless Climate Myth. And they're going on the offensive over this idea of a consensus view of science. Now, first of all, as Michael Crichton used to say, science is not consensus. and consensus is not science. And if you are a fan of stage plays, there's Ibsen's The Enemy of the People. And there's a line in there about how it is a lie that the majority is always right. Because before the majority can be right, one person must be right. And while that one person is right, the majority is wrong. Science is not a democracy. So the carbon Nazis have been going along with this. 97% of climate scientists agree humans are the sole cause of warming on Earth. And this article basically goes in and analyzes that claim. And what they found out, to nobody's surprise, is they were handling the study in a way to generate a predetermined outcome, where they went in and looked at climate papers, and any papers that didn't say, if the paper didn't say that humans weren't causing climate change, it was counted as support. But these papers all know that climate is changing and humans have a small microscopic impact. But that's a long way away from saying that this scientist, agrees that humans are warming the planet. They basically cherry-pick the data. It's a big, fat lie. Now, under scientific method, the way it is supposed to work when the process is not being corrupted by politicians, you develop a theory. From the theory, you develop a model. Then you test the model to see if it replicates what is being seen in the real world. If it does not, the model is faulty, and you scrap it and you go back to square one and start working with a new theory. Well, all along this whole human-caused global warming, going back to 2000 when they were proclaiming snowfalls were a thing of the past, every time the models didn't match the real world, there was always an excuse. Oh, it's the polar vortex. Don't you understand that global warming leads to incredible amounts of ice and snow? And they just kept making excuses for why the models weren't actually predicting what was going on. If you read my ClimateGate page, there's even a quote from one of the leading lights of the global warming movement about how they're not interested in what the world is really doing. They're relying on the computer models to scare you. We have this model. It's from a computer, a big, expensive computer. A lot of tax dollars went into that computer. How can you doubt what comes out? But always remember, programmers have what they call the GIGO law. Garbage in, garbage out. Computers can do amazing calculations, but if the primary assumptions are flawed, what comes out the back end of that computer is just junk. Very impressive looking junk, but that's it. Now, speaking of computers, a lot of problems with malware out there, and the government doesn't seem interested in dealing with it. They've got other things to deal with, like trying to keep the bankers happy and so forth. There is a new ransomware making the rounds called Petya, and we have an article where a security researcher has published a tool that will allow you to rescue your data from this Petya ransomware without having to pay the ransom. And so this is something you should probably download and have on a flash drive somewhere. Now, this ransomware is costing huge amounts of money. I mean, the FBI's official response is, if you are hit with the ransomware, just go ahead and pay it. We can't do a thing for you. And we're hearing about all these hospitals that are being targeted with ransomware and all these companies. And there was an article we had on WhatReallyHappened.com today about it's become an epidemic. And companies are just paying and paying and paying and paying. This is criminal activity going on. And our government, or the government, it's not my government anymore, not since they broke from the Constitution, the government doesn't want to do anything about it. Are they behind the ransomware? Is that what the NSA's really been doing all this time? Remember, Kaspersky Labs identified the Equation Group hackers as being part of the NSA. And we know this government is so desperate for money, they are engaging in crime against the people. We had that caller earlier in the show today that was out there saying that under the civil forfeiture laws, the police are stealing more from the American people than the regular criminals. And so we have all this ransomware, cyber attacks going all over the internet, costing billions of dollars every year. And the government's attitude is, big deal. We don't need to go after the cyber criminals, but by golly, if you doubt human-caused global warming, we're going to sue you out of existence. Maybe it's just another way for the government to plunder the people. Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense here. Now, Windows 10 has just launched a blue screen of death that includes a QR code where you can scan it with some other non-infected device, and you'll be taken to a Microsoft page that will tell you what's going on. And it sounds like a really good idea, except it's already being exploited as a venue for malware. The malware pretends to crash your machine. It pops up the blue screen of death with a QR code that goes to another malware server. Now, I'm against the death penalty, but I'm willing to make an exception for these hackers and ransomware writers and cyber criminals. I think we ought to take one that we know is guilty and crucify them on a live video feed on the internet. If they are reasonably healthy, it'll take them a week to die. And you do that, and you broadcast it to the world, and at least the more amateur cyber criminals are probably going to think twice about playing games. The professionals are going to go on doing it. The NSA people are going to go on doing it. But these little kiddies in the basement with a JavaScript engine are probably going to think, it's not really worth it for me to go on out and start breaking into these things. Now, rumors are flying that Microsoft is going to be including Ubuntu Linux as a permanent feature of all their future operating systems, kind of, sort of, maybe. My concern would be that Microsoft might try to exert some kind of intellectual property control over Linux, the way so many phone makers have tried to basically hijack the Android operating system. Remember, Android began as an open source project, and Google kind of commandeered it, and now Google is sort of treated as the author for, or the owner and controller of Android. And we know Microsoft would like to stop the migration of people away from Windows to Linux. So they're going to put Linux in there and see, you can buy Windows and you'll still get Linux. Why not just buy the Linux? Why go through the hassles of dealing with a Windows operating system if your intention is to be using Linux? That's what I'd like to know. Back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. We're just now getting word. I was right. He was waiting to the end of the day to make the announcement, then he could skedaddle. The judge in New Jersey has said Ted Cruz can stay on the New Jersey primary ballot. He's insisting that natural born does not mean born in the United States of America. He won't say what he thinks it means. Maybe the founding fathers wanted to ban people born of cesarean section. That's what it means. And it's other nonsense. Now, the judge is flat out wrong, for reasons we've laid out in our own article on the subject. And I, for one, do not cede my right to think for myself to anybody wearing a funny-looking robe. And it is a sign of just how corrupt the system is. And if you want another indicator, this is really bizarre. This is over in the Washington Examiner. The IRS head is admitting that the IRS is encouraging illegal immigrants to steal Social Security numbers to file tax returns. This came from John Koskinen, responding to a question from Senator Dan Coates about why the IRS appears to be collaborating with taxpayers who file tax returns using fraudulent information. Koskinen explained it. Well, what happens in this situation is someone is using the Social Security number to get a job, but they're filing their tax return with their taxpayer identification number. And he says, they're undocumented aliens, but they're paying taxes, and we've got to have the money. It's in everybody's interest to have them pay the taxes they owe. Now, there are two problems with that. One, most of these people are filing for refunds. If they're undocumented immigrants, they're not going to file a tax return where they have to pay money. They're filing for refunds. Second of all, what's going to happen when those computers start chewing through all those Social Security numbers? Apparently, the IRS is ignoring the system they have set up with Social Security that warns them when a name doesn't match a Social Security number. I mean, this is ridiculous. They're just funneling more money to the illegal immigrants. It's absurd. It's just absolutely absurd. Now then, getting on back to the world of computers. Story coming out of ZDNet, and this is a real problem. I've heard about it before. Surveillance cameras that are being sold on Amazon are being delivered from the factory infected with malware. And I've actually seen this happen on other products that I've bought on eBay that will come with a piece of hardware in an install disk. And the most recent example was a borescope for my computer. Now, fortunately, my Windows simply treats it like a USB camera. And the only thing that was on the install disk was a USB camera viewer recorder, which there are others. And I put this disk in my computer, and all of my security stuff lights up. Malware, malware, malware. So I threw the disk away. But it's a reality. Now, sometimes it happens by accident. Many years ago, I was associated with a company called Aegis Software. And they made computer games for the Amiga computer. This was back in the days of 3.5-inch hard shells. And they had a game that was a space shuttle simulator called Challenger, which was an unfortunate selection of names. But it never got that far, because it turned out the master disk they prepared to go to the duplicator was infected with malware, and they didn't realize it, and it basically destroyed the company. Now, it's also entirely possible that a lot of these vendors in China have simply been approached by organized crime who are saying, we will pay you some little money under the table as long as we get to put this malware on the disk that comes with your system. It's open season on every computer user on planet Earth, and nobody in government seems to care. They don't want to do anything about it. After all, when you're forced to buy $600 worth of software to keep your data protected, well, the government gets a piece of the action in taxes from the software vendor. And then you have to buy an upgrade because there's a new malware out there that the old system can't find. It's like the old mafia protection racket. You gotta buy protection. You gotta buy protection from us or something bad gonna happen to your computer. That's the game they're playing. We live under a government that is a criminal organization. But then aren't they all around the world? That's certainly the message from the Panama Papers. Now, we were talking a little while ago about the trials and tribulations of the movie Vaxxed. It was going to be in the Tribeca Film Festival, then it got yanked under pressure from the festival's financial backers. It was going to be shown in Houston, got pulled from that film festival, apparently under orders from the mayor's office. And this seems to have established a precedent to simply ban the showing of movies that gore some corporation's ox. Because over in the London Film Festival, they were scheduled to show a film about long-term survivors of HIV, and the festival got bombarded with complaints from all these big pharmaceutical companies and AIDS charities. You can't show that people are actually surviving HIV. We need to sell them medications and treatments. And the London Film Festival caved in and yanked the film. Now then, over in Ukraine, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant has had an emergency shutdown of unit number 6. They're acknowledging a release of radioactivity. Here is the problem we are looking at. Nuclear reactors are built with a fixed lifespan because of the deterioration of the metal in the pressure vessel and the concrete under neutron bombardment. They are only supposed to last so many years. 30 is kind of the industry average. Because of the economic stresses being suffered by nations, they're recertifying the reactors. They're allowing them to run longer. Oh, we can go another 10 years, nothing's going to happen. And we're starting to see more and more around the world these accidents, radiation leaks. Coming from New York, Florida, the disaster with San Onofre, let alone Fukushima. And a lot of people write and say, oh, you're anti-science. No, I'm not. I know these systems can be made to work safely and reliably as long as you don't let some money junkie make those key safety decisions. And I keep pointing to that nuclear power station in Onagawa, Japan, where the design engineer fought a pitched battle against any cutbacks on safety systems. The money junkies wanted to only pay for a smaller tsunami wall. They didn't want to put the generators up on pedestals. And this Japanese engineer stood firm and said, no, you will build this to be safe, to survive the historical record of tsunamis and quakes in this region. And unfortunately, it is sad that he did not live to see his vindication, because Onagawa's power station was the only one along that coastline that survived the quake and tsunami. These things can be made to work. But when you let people addicted to money make these critical decisions, they're always going to cut corners, because they want to make the stockholders happy and they want a big bonus check. And then when it all blows up, they'll hire Ann Coulter to come on out and say, well, a little radiation's good for you. Because they think you're all morons, and you'll actually believe that kind of nonsense. It is amazing when you, even today, after 22 years, I am still stunned sometimes at the sheer scale of lies that we are saturated with every single day. Vaccines are safe. GMO is safe. Radiation is good for you. Not to mention all those lies used to start the wars. I honestly think politicians don't dare tell the truth because they're afraid we might learn how to tell the difference. So they lie about everything. Absolutely everything. All right. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Share what you know with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.